Hello and welcome to another episode of Medisodes. I'm here with Shrey, Anupam and Adrian, and today we will be discussing stress, how it affects the body, how we can all reduce stress to improve our well-being. But first, let's look at what stress actually is. Stress is a response that has helped humans and animals survive for millions of years. We will be looking at the specific stress response in humans now. When a person is in a stressful situation, your nervous system responds by releasing certain hormones. These hormones are cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones will cause the heart rate and blood pressure to increase. This means that more oxygenated blood is supplied faster to muscle cells, allowing them to contract due to oxygen being supplied to the muscle cells for aerobic respiration. During the stress response, muscles tighten and your senses sharpen. These physical changes, as well as those mentioned previously, increase a person's strength and stamina, as well as enhance reaction times and focus. In dangerous situations, these physical changes to your body allows humans to physically escape from threats, such as predators. However, this stress response also increases focus, as mentioned previously, and this increased focus can be vital when doing important activities, such as tests or driving vehicles, such as aeroplanes, where the pilot needs to focus as they are responsible for hundreds of lives. It might seem like stress seems to only have advantages. However, stress can also cause many negative effects on our body in terms of our health, and Anupam will now cover this.
There are many stress-related disorders and diseases that are directly caused by stress. This can include not only physical disorders, but also mental disorders. When I'm going to be talking about them, I'm going to split the mental illnesses as disorders and the physical illnesses as diseases. So the mental disorders that are caused by stress are illnesses that are a result of an atypical response to both short and long-term stress due to physical, mental, or emotional reasons. This can include things such as OCD, PTSD, and many more. OCD, for example, or obsessive compulsive disorder, is a mental disorder in which a person has certain thoughts repeatedly, called obsessions, or feels the need to perform certain routines repeatedly, called compulsions, to an extent that generates distress or impairs general functioning. The person is unable to control either the thoughts or activities for more than a short period of time. Common compulsions, for example, include hand washing, counting, or checking to see if doors and other things are locked. These activities happen to such a degree that a person's daily life is negatively affected, sometimes taking up to more than an hour a day to work through all their compulsions. Most adults realize the behaviors don't make sense, but the condition still persists. It's also associated with tics, anxiety disorder, and an increased risk of suicide. Treatment involves stuff such as psychotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. Another type of stress disorder is acute stress disorder, which occurs in individuals who don't have any other apparent psychiatric disorder in response to exceptional physical or psychological stress, usually in a short period of time. While severe, such reactions usually subside within hours or days. The stress may be an overwhelmingly traumatic experience, for example, an accident, a battle, a physical assault, or an unusually sudden change in social circumstances of the individual, such as multiple bereavement. Individual vulnerability and coping capacity play a huge role in its occurrence, and the severity of acute stress reactions, as evidenced by the fact that not all people exposed to expositional stress develop symptoms, means that it varies from person to person. However, an acute stress disorder does fall under the class of stress disorders. Symptoms shown considerably vary, but usually include an initial state of daze with some constriction of the field of consciousness and narrowing of attention, an inability to comprehend stimuli, and widespread disorientation. It's also followed either by further withdrawal from the surrounding situation to the extent of a dissociative stupor, or by agitating and over acting. Other signs include an increased heart rate or tachycardia, sweating, hyperventilation. These symptoms usually appear within minutes of the impact of the stressful stimulus and disappear within 2 to 3 days. Now let's talk about PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Causes of PTSD are either natural or human disasters, war, serious accidents, the witness of violent death of others, many of the same things that happen with acute stress disorder. But while acute stress disorder is a temporary thing that hits very intensely, PTSD happens repetitively over a long period of time. There are predisposing factors, such as personality traits or previous history of psychiatric illness, and typical symptoms include flashbacks or reliving the trauma in the form of intrusive memories and dreams, a sense of detachment from other people, enhanced startle reactions and insomnia, and of course suicidal ideation and depression, which a lot of these disorders can lead to due to its effect on a person's mental health. And finally, one type of stress disorder that I'm going to be talking about is called surgical stress disorder. Now, this isn't a response to being directly injured during surgery, but is instead characterized by the activation of the sympathetic nervous system, endocrine responses, and as well as other immunological and hematological changes during the process of surgery. For example, stress ulceration is a single or multiple fundic mucosal ulcer forming that causes upper gastrointestinal bleeding and develops during the severe physiological stress of serious surgery. It can also cause erosion of mucus and superficial hemorrhages in patients who are critically ill, or in those who are under extreme stress, causing severe blood loss that can require transfusion. Again, this varies from person to person, and a lot of modern day surgery is focused around making sure that the person undergoing surgery is not stressed. Though in most cases they'll be unconscious, their body unconsciously will be reacting to the traumatic incident. Now let's move on to diseases that are either caused by or amplified by stress. And let's begin with heart disease, a very, very common disorder that affects a lot of people around the world. Heart disease was long suspected by researchers to be linked with signs of stress, and that those with higher signs of stress have a higher risk of having heart problems and high blood pressure. Researchers have now found direct correlation between the two. Stress is also related to some other problems such as smoking and obesity, which are again related to heart diseases and therefore indirectly increase the chance of someone suffering from heart diseases. Sudden emotional stress as well can trigger severe heart problems such as heart attacks. Avoiding complications for these is the same as avoiding any type of stress or avoiding other types of heart disease. So it follows eating, having a healthy lifestyle, smoking, and exercising. However, in many cases, people who are being treated for heart disease, such as via statins, will not be treated for the stress that is causing it, and in many cases that can cause it to regress. In obesity specifically, stress is very strongly associated with it. And this also includes due to people having eating disorders that are caused by stress. A final type of disease caused by stress is type 2 diabetes. While type 1 diabetes is genetic in nature, type 2 diabetes is related to a person's lifestyle, and stress-related problems can significantly worsen conditions related to type 2 diabetes. Stress tends to increase the likelihood of untimely eating and drinking, and overeating of foods, especially those in high fat, sugar, or cholesterol content, can significantly impact the proper production of insulin, again leading to weight gain and therefore type 2 diabetes. Additionally, stress can significantly raise the glucose level of people who already suffer from type 2 diabetes. This again can cause severe health complications, such as inducing heart attacks or strokes in a person. All in all, stress, although many people think of it as just a very simple disorder, has many different ways of affecting the body, both mental and physical. I'm now going to pass on to Adrian, who's going to talk about the genetic factors behind stress.
Thank you. Now I'm going to be talking about the relationships between stress and genetics. Stress and genetics are linked in two distinct ways, and we should consider each of these cases separately. One way in which stress and genetics overlap is a possible root of stress in genetics, to see if there's a genetic reason why someone may be more prone to stress and related issues. Another way in which stress and genetics overlap is a possibility that the stress a person experiences in their life will change their genes, changes that can be passed on to future generations. First, let's talk about how genetics plays a role in causing a stress response. The two main genes associated with stress response are COMF and BDNF. COMF is a gene that regulates your performance under pressure. When it comes to performance under pressure, there isn't just one or the other, but a scale of possible responses. This gene codes for an enzyme that helps to break down hormones such as dopamine. Dopamine plays a key role in your reward response, and the other hormones that the enzymes break down play a role in the stress response. Differences in this gene lead to different protein and enzyme shapes, which leads to differences in effectiveness in hormone breakdown, which then leads to differences in the stress that a person feels. BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, is a protein that improves the functioning of neurons by encouraging growth and protecting against negatives of stress. It also binds to the brain receptors, strengthening and improving the signals between the neurons. As far as the stress response is concerned, BDNF plays a role in a person's resilience to stress. Resilience describes a person's ability to tolerate and adapt to unfavorable, stressful situations. A person either has a high or low predisposition to stress, or any place in between. An awareness of this helps a person to focus on how to improve their resilience if needs be. Now, let's go on to the next case. The second of these cases, which suggests stress can lead to genetic changes that may or may not be passed on to future generations, lies within a much larger field of research called epigenetics. Firstly, let's go through what epigenetics is. Epigenetics takes the question of nature versus nurture to a whole new level of scientific complexity. Epigenetics is the study of changes in organisms caused by the modification of gene expression, rather than alteration of the genetic code itself. In the human genome, that is, all the genes that are present within a human's DNA, not all of the genes are active, and so not all of them have a role to play in the characteristics expressed. Genes can be either activated or deactivated, and epigenetics studies whether environmental factors can influence which genes are expressed and which are not. However, what epigenetics does not study are changes to the human genome itself. Within epigenetics, the base sequence of the human genome remains the same throughout, but rather, different sections of genes are activated or deactivated based on certain stimuli. Unlike genetic changes, epigenetic changes are reversible. Now, what is the role of epigenetics in stress? The best way to study the true effect of epigenetics is to use identical twins. Identical twins are monozygotic, meaning that they have both been formed from a single zygote, or fertilized egg cell, and hence have the same genetic makeup. While the underlying genetics is identical in both of these individuals, their initially identical epigenetics changes over time, which shows how environmental factors can alter the genes that are linked to stress. Recently, studies using mice, rats, fruit flies, and worms have confirmed that trauma and stress can affect epigenetic flags, which can then be passed on to the next generations. For example, if a female rat takes good care of her offspring, then the pups can cope better with stress, compared to rat pups that were ignored and had high levels of stress whilst growing up. In this case, the removal of stop signals on a specific gene is linked to happy offspring. Similarly, male mice who experience stress earlier on in their lives pass this tendency to be stressed on to future generations, where offspring are more likely to show symptoms of anxiety and stress if their parents were not as well looked after in their youth. Studies in humans are much more complex than this. In humans, research is much harder to control, as we generally do not have a reference value for epigenetic markers before and after for easy, clear-cut comparisons. However, what we do have is evidence that there is a greater likelihood that children are more likely to suffer from stress and stress-related issues, should their parents have experienced a lot of stress. An example of this would be the Holocaust victims. Their children and grandchildren have been shown to have a much greater probability of having mental health issues. However, the positive side of this is that our stress levels are not entirely governed by our ancestors' stress levels. Indeed, we know that at least some epigenetic markers are reversible, and we can potentially affect our epigenetics by living a healthy lifestyle, providing the body with the right building blocks for the favourable genetic flags. Recent research also shows that drugs can remove negative epigenetic markers and stop signals, which has been shown to allow changes in genes present in cancer, Alzheimer's, or diabetes to go back to their original state. So while we are still quite a way off from fully understanding the role epigenetics plays in the nature versus nature debate, it's clear that it's not just our genes that define us. Of course, genetics is far from the only cause of stress, and there are environmental factors that can also affect us. Environmental factors that do not affect our genes are also important in stress. Now, I'll hand over to Shrey, who will be talking about methods of alleviating stress.
So, although, as we discussed earlier, stress does have an important role within the body, we don't want to be at high stress levels constantly, as this can cause health problems. So, one of the best ways to reduce stress is exercise. And this may seem contradictory. Sorry, I'm going to start that again. So, one of the best ways to reduce stress is exercise. And this may appear contradictory. Putting your body through physical stress shouldn't reduce mental stress, surely. But this is because exercise reduces stress hormones such as cortisol and releases endorphins, which are chemicals that improve mood and are natural painkillers. This effect is strongest when exercise is done regularly, such as going on weekly runs or having a bike ride on the weekend. There's also the fact that exercise builds self-esteem and confidence in people's body, promoting general well-being. Exercise is also linked with improved sleep quality, which also helps to reduce the stress hormone levels. Another way to reduce stress is to light candles. Having lavender, rose, and sandalwood scents have been shown to reduce stress, and in conjunction with things like meditation and practicing mindfulness, this can help to reduce levels of stress. Also, caffeine plays a key role in stress as it causes more cortisol to be released. So if you drink maybe more than 5 or 6 cups of coffee a day and you're heavily reliant on caffeine, reducing your content of tea and coffee may help to reduce your stress levels. Also, spending time with friends and family and smiling, laughing, having a fun time relieves stress levels. And we need to make sure we're finding time in our days to meet other people and not just focus on work. We also have to learn how to say no and make sure that we don't just accept more jobs and more tasks just because we feel obligated to. You shouldn't take on more than you can handle because that will just increase your stress levels. Further to my point, we should avoid procrastination when we do say yes to this. Many of us can relate to cram revising before an exam and the stress that can cause. It's important to stay on top of priorities and make sure that tasks don't just build up. And you can to manage this, you can create to-do lists on your phone or in a notebook and rank the tasks by priority of when they need to be done or how important they are, and setting realistic deadlines for when you want them to be done is important in managing tasks and making sure that you don't get snowed under with loads and loads of work. Another good way to reduce stress is yoga. Originally developed thousands of years ago in India, yoga helps to reduce stress by bringing awareness to the body and breathing. It's shown to enhance mood and is also shown to be as effective as antidepressant drugs, lowering cortisol levels, reducing blood pressure, and reducing heart rate. Meditation, although originally developed in a religious context, can also help to reduce stress. And a good way to incorporate meditation into your daily routine is to take 5 minutes just before you're about to go to bed to just reflect on your day and calm yourself down and make sure that your stress levels are as low as possible before you go to sleep, because sleep quality plays a vital role in stress as well. You can also play soothing music as you meditate, and deep breaths have been shown to reduce heart rate and prepare you for sleep so that you have the best quality of sleep. And you may even choose to use sleep trackers to see what quality of your sleep is. So those were just a few methods to reduce stress, and it's really important that we prioritize this and make sure that we take care of ourselves.
So thank you for everyone's points, and I think that we've got a really good insight into how stress works, how it affects the body, and the methods in which we can reduce our stress to improve our lives. So that's it for this week's episode of Medisodes. Remember to like, subscribe for new episodes every week, and thank you for listening.